Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. We are now joined by our holistic inspiration coach, Dr. Laura Garland, joining us here also. She's a shamanic Reiki master, and so much more, owner of her own company. And she's here today to enlighten us, as always. Charleston Reiki and Tarot.com is the website. How you doing?
Doing well, Jill. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Great conversation last week. You really were on point about a lot of things. For those that don't know you yet, just introduce yourself, please, and we can get started.
Sure. I am a holistic inspiration coach, and that's a type of life coach. A lot of people don't know what that is. It's if you don't have a diagnosable condition where you need to go see a counselor, but your life isn't going the way you want it to, you go see a life coach.
Yeah.
And that's that kind of fills in the gap there, where if you don't have a diagnosable condition and you go to a counselor, your insurance isn't going to pay for it. So
true.
and counselors right now are so slammed that even getting in to see one is really tough. I know here in the Charleston region, I actually don't know a counselor whose books aren't completely filled, except for like the ones who just graduated in January. So
wow.
Yeah, so it's really tough if you're going through some stuff, which is totally understandable right now, and you don't know what to do. So a life coach is that step where you have someone to talk to who can help you work through things, but you're not necessarily diagnosable, or maybe you are on the edge of that and you can't get in to see someone right now. So a lot of life coaches do still have openings available. And you don't, with a life coach, you don't have to be in the same town. You don't have to be in the same state, because many of us work long distance. Yep. We do Zoom. Whereas with a counselor, you have to at least be in the same state because of license laws and it's just complicated.
All that good stuff. Exactly. Oh, well, thanks for being here. Last week you talked about something. What was it called? Mercury retrograde.
Mercury retrograde. And we are still in Mercury retrograde.
Yep. And unfortunately, you mentioned all these electronic issues. I had so many more electronic issues with my car, let alone computer, and friends I knew. And I was like, this woman I speak to, she told me about it. And we were Googling it. So you were just really spot on about it, just to let you know.
Well, thank you. Like I said last week, I've got 10 years of data on this being crazy. Yeah. Funny thing, just before we got on, like 10 minutes, I think a transformer in our area blew, or somebody hit something. There was really loud noise. And it took our internet out briefly.
Oh no.
Weirdly, like everything blanked. And so it was either a transformer or somebody hit a pole and it jerked something. I'm not really sure. I couldn't see anything when I went out, but the internet went out for a little bit. I'm like, oh no.
Oh my gosh.
Like, oh, I'm gonna have to do this on my phone or something. So but
it worked out perfectly, right? So we're good. We're good.
Yeah, it came back up, but this is the kind of weird thing that happens during Mercury retrograde. And I of course got a notice for jury duty during Mercury retrograde. And so I tried to go on the website you have to do a pre-questionnaire thing here in Charleston and fill it in before you go in. And I tried to do that. It got me nowhere. So I'm like, oh no. So I actually had to fill out the paper thing and put a stamp on it and mail it because the website just wasn't functioning at all. This was actually a Monday. I was oh God. So yeah, and just to let you know, in 2 weeks we may not be here. All depends on whether I've been selected for jury duty.
Got it. All right, it happens.
Yeah. So there's that. But yeah, Mercury retrograde is going into early February. So communication really kind of crazy. You can have issues with significant others, friends, family, where communication just doesn't work at all. Actually, Monday night, my husband, we've been married for what year is this? 2022.
2022. Yeah,
for 22 years. And we don't fight a lot. We just don't do that. But Monday night, miscommunication.
As always.
And then we just stopped and stared at each other and we're like, oh my God, what happened? That was the stupidest thing ever.
Yeah.
And I was like, Mercury retrograde. And he's like, oh God. And because it was completely miscommunication. I said one thing, he heard something completely different. He said something, I heard something completely different. And it was just idiotic. And so this comes up. And then you go to, then if you do miscommunication with people or things, you're interpreting things poorly during this time, which happens a lot. People will hear things not the way they were said.
Yeah.
You might hear a tone wrong. You might literally think the words are not what they were said. It's very strange what happens with during this time. And we're heading into the heart of winter right now for a lot of people. Y'all in the north, this is like your coldest weeks often come right now, and the snow comes and there's, it's a long sight until spring for y'all.
Yeah. True.
So especially where that is occurring right now, you can be going inward and really doing this where you get in your head and you just ruminate on things.
Yeah.
And if you've heard things wrong or felt things, it can just get a lot, and you start doubting yourself.
Yeah.
You start doubting who you are, what's going on. You could have at this point fallen into patterns that you wanted to remove. So you patterns that you were doing last year that you made a New Year's resolution about not doing, you could have fallen back into those patterns, and then you're beating yourself up more.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is taking your self-esteem down. This happens a lot during this time frame, from like late January through February. It's a very significant thing. And then on top of that, there's people who have SAD, the seasonal affective disorder. And if you live in a place where it's gloomy a lot, that can be really, really can really drag you down.
Yeah.
I grew up in upstate New York. So during this time of year when I was growing up, we rarely saw the sun. It was just, it was gray all the time. I learned the color battleship gray by looking up at the clouds during the winter. It was just continuous. And we didn't have the diagnosis seasonal affective disorder, but I would literally just like, as a kid, just like stop talking and just like curl into myself during this time frame. So I know what this does for people, and it's all to do with a lot with the light. You can get lights, by the way. If you don't know, you can go out and you can get the sun lamps, the ones that have the same spectrum, and you just like put it on your desk and turn it on in the morning and stare at it, and then have it on during the day. Very, very, very helpful. But all of this combined can really take people down during these next couple of weeks. And I want people to understand that it can be normal, but it doesn't have to continue. You don't have to. Seasonal, if you have seasonal affective disorder, even like just a mild, like it's gloomy and you're like, oh God, no more gloom, you can get one of those lights. Heck, you can stare at your computer screen with the blue filter not in place, so that you're actually getting some of that blue and yellow light and all of that in. Not the best. The full spectrum lights are better, but it's a way if you can't get out and get one of those lights. But having it drag you down and being sad during this time frame, it doesn't have to be. It just doesn't have to be. I actually caught a little part of T. Harv Eker recently did a little class, webinar, podcast, whatever you want to call it. And I think, please, T. Harv, don't. I think the title was pretty much "Don't Believe Anything You Think," or "Don't Believe Anything Your Mind Says." It was something really close to that. And I caught a little bit of it as a reminder, because pre-COVID, I did workshops where I worked with people with anxiety and trauma to help them. In addition to, a lot of them were people who saw my husband, who's a mental health counselor, or others in the area, and help them additionally come up with strategies. And one of the things that I've really talked about is, you don't have to believe what your mind is saying. This is the weirdest thing. Your mind chit chatters to you all day long, just chit chat. And a lot of the stuff it's saying to you is completely BS.
Yep.
Because our mind gets programmed when we're young. We get programmed by the people around us, by the circumstances around us, by what's going on, and our mind's main function is to protect us.
Yep.
That's actually its main function, is to protect us. It's all about survival. So our mind focuses specifically on negative patterns because it's about survival. So we have what's called a negative bias, and this is very well known. You'll remember negative things before you remember positive things.
Yep. And
you'll remember many more negative things than you'll remember positive things. And so the chit chat in your head is all about these negative things a lot of the time, especially when you start to get down. Your brain just starts this chit chat about, and it can be self-esteem things, self-doubt things. It can be, you've gone back to that terrible pattern. You're drinking, or you're smoking, or you're not exercising, or you're not meditating, or you're whatever it is that you're not doing that you had done a New Year's resolution about. And so you can get really down on yourself, and your mind is trying to not change things. Actually, it's not trying to get you to do those healthy things. It's not. It's trying to keep you in the same spot, but it just chit chats at you the whole time. And you don't have to believe it. You just don't have to believe what your mind is telling you. Buddha famously talks about, you have to know yourself, know thyself. And that is knowing that what your mind is saying isn't necessarily real. It isn't, because some of those things could have been, like what the Mean Girls said when you were in 6th grade.
I'm thinking about the movie too, but
yeah, it could have been what those, especially if you're a female, it could have been what those Mean Girls said when you were in 6th grade. You were 11 or 12 or 13, depending on what part of 6th grade and how your birthday fell with schooling. And what you were then is not what you are now, not even close. And those Mean Girls were having their own issues, their own self-esteem issues, and all of this. And that's one of the reasons I ran in that Mean Girl pack, was to try to build their own self-esteem. So, so It could be something like that. It could be something your grandmother said when you were 4.
True.
And your grandmother was having a bad day. Maybe she was going through menopause and having a bad day. And you came in dirty or something because you were out having fun playing, and she said something horrible about your appearance.
Yep.
You were 3 or 4, but that's stuck in your psyche, and that is still there. And now when you get down, that's what plays. But you don't have to believe it. You don't have to believe it. I think it was Dan Millman of the Peaceful Warrior said, you don't have to control your mind, but you don't have to let it control you.
Got it. Yeah.
So Buddhist philosophy and meditation and all of that is actually really about calming the mind and being able to be in control of your thoughts, which is really tough. It's very tough to be really good at that. So Buddha would want you to have your mind really calmed and very, very under control. But that takes years of meditation, a lot of work. There are some shortcuts and things that you can do. There's some hypnosis classes and things that are out there that can help with that. But having that all the time is really difficult in our busy lives. But Dan Millman's quote makes it much better. You don't have to control your mind. You just don't have to let it control you. So you might not be able to shut off everything it says, but you don't have to believe it.
Yeah.
You don't have to believe it. And that's really key, because we believe the chatter, and it makes us more anxious.
Yeah.
More and more anxious, more and more anxious. And at the same time, more and more self-doubt, more anxious, more self-doubt. And it just combines into this big ball of icky.
Yeah.
Especially during this time of year when, the sun goes down really early and it's dark out, and maybe it didn't even, you couldn't tell the sun was up.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're just sitting there, and, work is done, and you're just sitting there going, oh my God. And you just start this thinking process. Or in the middle of the afternoon, like that 3 o'clock slump, you go into your head and you just start this cycle. It's like you're a little hamster on a little wheel running in there, just spouting off stuff that has no meaning. And you don't have to believe it. You just don't have to believe it. And during Mercury retrograde, you're going to want to believe it, because communications are issues. So you're going to want to believe that, yes, these terrible things are happening in your head. And it's not. You just don't have to believe it. And this is where mindfulness comes in. Yes, we're always back to mindfulness. We can't get away from it.
No.
So this is where mindfulness comes in, where mindfulness is kind of like being an observer of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So you watch yourself do these thoughts, and then you step off to the side and you're like, I'm doing these thoughts again.
Hey, yeah.
Oh, and you might have to let it run for a little while before you can get into a place where you can be like, oh, okay, I'm doing these thoughts. I don't have to believe these thoughts. I don't have to believe this about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to believe this about other people, because you might be making up entire scenarios about your relationship with someone else. And it's made up in your mind. There's no basis in reality. And so by stepping off to the side and being mindful that you're doing this fantasizing this, because it really is fantasy, thinking about things that are not real, stepping off to the side, you get a chance to realize that you're doing that. And then a lot of people will tell you that one of the simplest things that you can do is just say thank you for that thought.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that thought. That's all you got to say.
Simple.
Thank you for that thought. And then you just let it go. Now, the let it go is the hard part. Having been sucked down a rabbit hole, wormhole, or whatever you want to call it, multiple times, the letting go is the hard part. Once you can see that you're doing the thoughts and say thank you for the thought, you just tell your brain thank you for that. It's just doing what it's programmed to do. You start to unprogram that by cutting the thought line. For trauma patients, for people who've had trauma that has resulted in maybe all the way to PTSD.
Yeah.
What happens is something triggers a pattern and a whole series of neurons fire in the brain. They are hardwired and they fire, and there's no thought to it at all. It's an instantaneous reaction, and this is why people will go into various places where it's not great for them, and if you can get in to see someone to do EMDR, that's one of the best treatments, because it literally goes into the brain and unwires the hardwired neurons. Mindfulness helps you realize when you're doing a pattern, and by being able to step off to the side for a few seconds, it allows you to start to undo some of those neuron patterns. So even if you're not all the way to PTSD, maybe it's just some anxiety that you have, maybe it's just those thought patterns that you've got going, and they've become hardwired so that you just think this train of thought no matter what. It may not result in PTSD, but it's a train of thought that is not helpful. If you can get off to the side and think for just a second, oh, I'm doing that again. Thank you for that thought. By saying thank you for that thought, you interrupt the pattern. And it's all about interrupting the pattern. And the more you interrupt the pattern, the less the pattern stays wired together. It starts to unwire in your brain. And that's what we want. We want to unwire these things that grandma said when you were 3, or the main girl said when you were 12, or, maybe it was, if you're a guy listening, maybe it was something that a high school girl said to you when you hadn't, fully grown out yet. And she said something, and it's just totally taking your self-esteem down when it comes up. And so we want to unwire those things because they're not real anymore. They're just not real. And if it is to a full-blown anxiety or PTSD that's going on, then professional help is where we really, really love you to go. But if you're only at low levels of that, life coaching. Find someone to do some life coaching with you, to talk you through things like this, to help you work on finding the mindfulness. And maybe it isn't all the way to life coaching. Maybe you can find a mindfulness class in your area or something like that where you can do that. Although right now, going to an actual physical class is not necessarily the best thing in most places.
True. Yeah.
I know New York is finally coming down. You guys are doing better with your COVID. We, on the other hand, apparently it's so bad down here that we haven't reported in 5 days. Like they can't keep up with something or something. I'm not sure exactly what's going on down here, but literally South Carolina has refused to report for 5 days.
Oh, so, wow.
So I don't know. It's kind of crazy. But it is completely possible for you to break the patterns that are going on in your head. And I wanted to give people a few little tips here on this, because we are heading into that dark time of the winter, especially if you're up north. We actually had frost here.
Wow.
Which we really actually appreciate, because it kills the mosquitoes. And a little while outside of town, they had quite a bit of ice, and like that. But it is that time when we go in and we think and we ruminate, and it's a normal process, but you don't have to make it a sad process.
True.
You can make it an uplifting process where you're actually breaking patterns in your brain, reforming new patterns.
Yep.
And this is the way to freedom. That idea of freedom, mental freedom, that we all want. We want to feel a sense of freedom within ourselves. And that is by breaking this chain that pulls down your self-esteem, pulls you into doubt, makes you question yourself, makes you feel bad, may send you all the way into panic attacks.
Hopefully not, but yes, you never know. Yeah. Let's be realistic. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so we want to break that pattern, and saying to your mind, thank you for that thought, thank you for that, whatever the phrase is that works for you, but something like that where you just acknowledge it and say thank you, and then let yourself move on to something else. That's the real key
too. Mm-hmm.
Is letting yourself move on to something else, saying thank you, and kind of thinking about closing a door.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're closing a cupboard, whatever in your mind that you can imagine, you just thank you and closing it down so that you can move on to something else. And one of the fastest ways to move on to something else, if you can do this pattern where you say thank you for that, and then immediately think of something you love. Now, for some people, it's really easy to think of a pet. And just imagine their pet like in their arms, or if it's a larger one, petting it or whatever. That is something that immediately will break patterns. Thinking of a pet. For some people, it's a child. Think of your little one, and just when they're at their sweetest, mm-hmm. and that will also break it. For some people, it's their spouse or their significant other. For some people, it's a place. Like thinking of an absolutely beautiful place, but something that brings up that sense of love really quickly after saying thank you will break it faster than anything else and give you something else to think about. So hopefully that'll help some people as we go through this time, and you can start breaking some of those patterns that are dragging you down, because
of course,
lift it up, not drag down.
And how can we reach out to you for more information? How can we book a session? And what does it normally typically require? Someone just wants to reach out to you, they have an initial consult?
Yes. So if they want to reach out, we can do phone 843-259-8349, or email drlaura.coach. So that's drlaura.coach@gmail.com. And yes, we can do a consult just to see whether or not we're going to mesh, because it's really important to mesh with someone that you're going to work with. So see if we've got that click, and then we just go from there to find out what it is you need specifically to uplift yourself and move forward.
Thank you so much. I love it. I love it. I love it. And website one more time, Dr. Laura Garland.
It is Reiki and Tarot, CharlestonReikiandTarot.com.
Perfect. Thank you for your time today. Always enlightening us. Always a spitfire. Seriously. Thank you for lifting my mood here, and to our listeners as well. Have a great day, sweetheart. And hopefully you will be back in a few weeks. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.